Hey and welcome to third C64 video for 1989. There are quite a few fun titles in today, so make sure to let me know what you think about them after watching. Monte Carlo Casino is my most favorite casino game to this day, even if only cause I don't really play casino games anymore. It still is. In short, it's a single player casino game where you start with just $10,000 and a dream to make it big and win a lot. It features 5 games of roulette, blackjack, 5-card draw poker, craps and jackpot slots. Being released by Codemasters, I expected it to be a budget release, but it feels anything but budget. Graphics, while in most screens static, are very nice and always show all the players at the table you're at. Aside from jackpot slots, that is. Funny enough, it is always the same bunch of folks, so clearly they are either working casino or you for the money. I used to play Monte Carlo Casino with 2 cousins of mine back in the day, alternating in place trying to see who could make more in roulette and both card games. Craps and jackpot slots we played the least. Perhaps Monte Carlo Casino is a simple game with very basic easy-to-code mechanics, but it's hella fun and the title screen tune is forever engraved in my psyche as one of the few 8-bit chiptunes I will never forget. If you like casino games or just wanna chill out for a little while between more action-packed titles, there's hardly anything better on C64. Mr Heli, originally known in the arcades as Battle Chopper, is a horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up and a great example how arcade conversions should be made. And I'm not only saying it because it's excellent, but also because its 16-bit computer counterparts of the time, so Amiga and Atari ST, were trash. As in case of most games that originated from cigarette smoke-filled arcades, plot in Mr Heli is very basic and there just to serve as a reason for all the destruction that you'll be causing. To summarize it, an evil villain named only as Mr MadMatty is threatening the planet and you, being the universal badass that you are, take upon yourself to save us again. This time, flying armed to the teeth Battle Chopper. Mr Heli's graphics are incredible, sounds and music are pretty good too, and it plays like a freaking charm, even if it's a bit difficult. But, and that's kinda important here, while being challenging, it's not frustrating. It sits somewhere in the border between the two, in a perfect spot to be enjoyed by all fans of the genre. Brace yourselves, cause this one's going to be straight for the reddit.com/r/unpopular opinion, cause I think that myth history in the making on C64 is very similar to first Shadow of the Beast on the Amiga. So an action platformer with incredible groundbreaking for the system presentation, and that's pretty much it. A show-off of system's hidden power and capabilities that only great coders that really mastered the machine could bring into life. Oh, and you gotta see the game's cover and compare it to the gameplay that's on the screen now. Let me show you. While both are great, they don't have anything to do with each other. An early example of buy-bait, I think. That said, to be completely transparent with you, different releases had different covers, so there was also one that kinda fits the gameplay. Check it out. Anyway, coming back to our game at hand, in C64 version you play as a teenage boy that fell through a tear in space-time continuum and ended up in so-called Time of Legends. Then he is rescued by High Priestess, who informs him that their world is under attack from the Dark Angel, who must be stopped. And if he succeeds, he'll be able to come back home. And since you're a stand-up guy that you are, and don't have much other choice than to control the brat, you will help the priestess to save her world. Myth features many different kinds of regular enemies, special bosses, environmental puzzling, and a whole slew of various weapons to find and use against the baddies. It's a decent but not great game that, similarly to earlier mentioned Shadow of the Beast, gained popularity because of its visuals, which are stunning, no doubt about that, but the gameplay loop itself is just good at best. On one hand, I couldn't wait till we get to the Newzealand Story. On the other, I dreaded that we eventually will, because I remember it as this awesome arcade conversion that I could play at home and have a lot of fun with beautiful graphics, memorable tune and all the addictive gameplay that the arcade cabinet offered. But I'm no fool. Am I, Bruce? I'm Batman. Thanks, buddy. I can always count on you. So, I'm no fool, at least not big enough to think that what I remember about a 30-year-old game is all sunshine and rainbows as I recall it. And it's not. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The Newzealand Story is an action platformer ported from the arcades to our little C64. That places you in shoes of a chicken named Tiki, literal shoes I might add, that has to save all her tribe members who were kidnapped and caged by the evil leopard seal. So you'll embark on an epic quest through all of New Zealand, visiting places like Auckland, Waitamo Caves and Mount Cook. Each level is unforgivingly timed and you have to crossbow your way through what seems like hundreds of respawnable enemies to get to the caged chicken and save them. As you go about it, you'll be able to collect upgrades like extra lives, laser shots, bombs and even fireballs. The original concept, while difficult, was very addictive, and C64's version is no different, but even more difficult because of weird at times collision boxes, a bit unpredictable controls and badly chosen background colors for some stages, so that they clash with the enemies. All that makes this already difficult game even harder on C64. Does it make it a bad game though? Nope. not in the slightest, just one that will require a very specific player, one that today would enjoy all those Souls-like games. Nightdawn is a top-down arcade shooter. The goal of each level is very simple: to guide your tank from start to exit, defeating enemies and turrets along the way, all the while avoiding mines and solving very basic environmental puzzles like finding appropriate keys for the doors and switches for energy barriers. And this is pretty much where I could end this preview, as that's the gist of it. But there's little more. Not much more, but enough to cover another 30 seconds of gameplay footage or so. So, initially your tank has no weapon, so you have to find a cannon and preferably other useful upgrades like a mine detector, extra energy or a radar, just to gear up for the challenge. Nightdawn's graphics are not great, especially given what was possible on C64 by 1989, and same could be said about sound design. It's there, but it's not gonna raise the roof or turn any heads. Just your typical beeps and bops. And gameplay, while fun for a little while, is also a victim to a bit spongy controls and questionable collision detection. So, approach it only if the video in the background looks interesting to you, otherwise you can focus on our next game. A Nightmare on Elm Street is an action-adventure game based on a movie of the same name. The aim of the title is to free your friends from the grasp of Freddy Krueger, and to do so you pick one of 5 available characters, each having different starting item, abilities and appearance. The game is divided into 2 parts, first being a top-down view of the city where you have to locate Freddy's house while avoiding his attacks. And I'm gonna help you here, cause while the house is random, it's usually the one with trees next to it and blinking lights in the windows. And second part is inside of said house, which you have to explore to save souls of your friends. You do so by using appropriate objects where necessary. A Nightmare on Elm Street is a fun little game which sadly in my opinion holds very little replayability, but was quite popular back in the day. It's worth noting that Commodore's version plays no music in the background, which is rather disappointing for all fans of SID chip. While it's clear from the get-go that Ninja Commando is a budget title with its very basic loop and repeatable gameplay, for the price it was sold for, it's a pretty good game. I mean, you can't even get a cup of coffee for what it cost back then. In short, you're in control of a small ninja character and have to guide him to safety through a series of side-scrolling levels. These, however, are filled with enemy ninjas, pits, various obstacles and many different kinds of creatures like golems, worms and birds. And yes, all of these are deadly and out to get you. Initially you start with no weapon and can only defeat enemy ninjas by jumping on them, but as you progress you'll unlock various useful weapons like shurikens, bombs, flamethrower and a rifle. Ninja Commando is not great, but it's definitely not bad one either, and a good arcade ROM if you just wanna run around killing stuff to relax. I just heard myself saying that. So not to make YouTube gods angry, let me make that clear. I meant running around killing stuff in-game only. Forgive me, oh great YouTube overlords, for I have misspoken. The Ninja Warriors is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that was converted from the arcades. Out there, it was simultaneous 2-player game, usually built out of 2 free horizontally placed screens. And that is also why Commodore's version is in a widescreen letterbox mode to accommodate the gameplay of original to C64's capabilities. The gameplay is not very original, all you really do is walk right, kill enemies, rinse and repeat, and nothing more really. There's no varied moves or specials, just your ninja and his shurikens and knives. All that said, the game actually plays really well, it's fun and does not get old as fast as it really should given its repeatable format, which is nice. The graphics and sound design are really good, and if you're a fan of a genre, it's a worthy title to add to your collection, as despite not offering a 2-player mode, it's quite fun played alternating, swapping joystick between the 2 or even 3 players completing the levels. As far as I know, No Mercy was never released commercially outside of Germany, so overall you could consider it a really obscure title anywhere else. And as such, it's fantastic. I mean, definitely not the best shooter on C64, but easily one of the better ones. It's Operation Wolf clone that somehow feels and plays better than the original does. Same as Wolf, it's played from first-person perspective and you control a crosshair shooting at enemy soldiers and vehicles. There's quite a few of these to fight against too, ranging from infantry and tanks through helicopters to gunships, with many more introduced in decent selection of 7 available stages. So you won't get bored playing No Mercy. Just make sure to show none to your opponents. Mercy, that is. All levels are horizontally scrolling right, apart from the last that is static. While ammo is finite, you can collect replenishments for it, and both special rockets and health pickups too. You can only carry up to 3 rockets and they're launched with a spacebar, so back in the day either your friend launched them or you've done it with your own foot. If you enjoy demanding but not unfair classic shooters, there weren't many better released in 1989 on C64. Oil Imperium, aka Black Gold as the title may give away, is a business management game in which you're an oil magnate. or Oil Magnet Wannabe to be precise. And while it offers pretty solid economic model and it's decently realistic, its best quality without a shred of a doubt is a fun factor. It's just plain and simple fun. And while obviously you'll be purchasing oil fields, surveying for oil and finally drilling for it, you will also try to sabotage your opponent's fields, aim to fulfill the timed contracts, lay pipelines and extinguish oil fields' fires, and all that gets even better when played in multiplayer, which the game supports up to 4 of you competing on a single system. Black Gold is a German game, and although it's been mentioned in Amiga and DOS 10 Years of Gaming series, it's worth mentioning here too. I firmly believe that in the late 80s and early 90s, German developers made the best management and business simulation games, a lot better than anyone else did. And no, I'm not German. Phobia is a horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up and a pretty damn good one at that. The game consists of 15 levels, or planets as its story says, that are themed around things humans fear, some of our phobias if you will, so spiders, snakes and even dentists to name a few. And you must complete these fear-inducing stages to rescue the Galactic Emperor from hands of evil Phobos. Each level is composed out of 3 sections, first where you fly towards the planet, second where you fly around it, and finally third where you navigate the cavern systems within the planet. The graphics are fantastic and I swear that they get better with each level. And sound is pretty spot on too. There's no in-game music however, but given how great everything else is, it's not something that should deter you from playing. Phobia is one of the best shoot-em-ups on C64 and if you're a fan of a genre and never played it, it's the title you should try out from this video first. Since we've done with the good, let's cover the bad. But that's just a conditional bad really, meaning that you have to fulfill a certain requirement for it to be a bad for you. What I mean by that is that Phobia is Dark Souls of early shoot-em-ups. It's incredibly difficult, so if you like me and don't enjoy punishing games, then the difficulty level will definitely be a bad for you. Otherwise, everything with it is just stellar. Personally, I wouldn't risk saying that Pro Tennis Tour aka Great Courts is the best tennis game on C64, but even if it isn't, it's the second best at worst. And most likely the best looking one. It's slick, fast, beautifully animated and most of all immensely playable. But it's not an easy title. Oh no, for the first few or even a dozen of games if you're me, it's nigh impossible to get close to the net or even hit the ball. CPU player just seems ungodly good compared to what you can do. But that's a deception, as all Pro Tennis Tour really requires is practice. And if you do and invest some time in the game, you'll get progressively better with each game and eventually will not only learn all the tricks and plays, but will gain deeper appreciation for the title. Project Firestart is a C64 exclusive and one of the better looking and most cinematic experiences of 1989 on Commodore's Little System, also one of the progenitors of a whole survival horror genre. In the not so distant future of 2066, one of our spaceship laboratories, Prometheus, was running a genetic experiment codenamed Project Firestart. It was supposed to provide us with strong, durable, genetically modified miners. Moral implications of such experiments aside, the ship has been silent for a while, not responding to any hails or attempts of contact. So you, as the universal badass and hero extraordinaire, are sent to figure out what happened. When you get there, you'll find numerous corpses in various stadiums of rotting, clearly killed by unknown creatures. So as you try to gather and put the clues together to figure out chain of events that led to the situation, you'll fight monsters and will try to rescue a singular survivor that may be the only key to the mystery. Project Firestart looks phenomenal, like an early 16-bit game and not late 8-bit one. Especially that it's a very movie-like in its design with certain screens looking like cuts from a sci-fi horror movie. Even more so, as you go through the game, the ending, that are quite a few of, will depend not only on the outcome of the main game plot, but also on the puzzles that you did or did not solve while playing. But since I've praised the game to the moon and back, let's talk about what's not so great about it. For one, some of the enemy sprites look a little blocky and feel like they could have more frames of animation so that they would move more fluidly. And for second, the combat is clunky and difficult to get used to. Neither of these things should be a factor that stops you from playing, as even despite them, Project Firestart is fantastic. Rainbow Chaser is a random mixture of non-alcoholic sodas and juices that you down after a particularly strong shot that burns even as it's going in. Don't quote me on that, don't fact check it, just take it as it is. It is also a 1989 side-view flick-screen arcade platformer and a C64 exclusive. The evil witch has attacked the peaceful land of Eggbug, the good nameless wizard can stop her, let's call him Bubbles, Bubbles the wizard, same as Michael Jackson's monkey, but in this particular case I'm imagining him as Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys, in his green bastard costume. So Bubbles is capable of saving the land, but requires the rainbows that are spread across the land to create the concoction that would destroy her. So to confuse you even more, you play as a literal bubble, a purple one, and have to collect the rainbows and bring them back to the wizard. But since you can only carry 20 at once, multiple trips are necessary. The witch is not defenseless, however, and she left her monster goons everywhere to stop you in your tracks. This can be either avoided by jumping over or shot with limited supply of, brace yourself, shooting stars. As you go about your heroic mission, at least for an inanimate object the bubble is, you can collect various items, some of which award extra points or stamina, others replenish your shooting stars. Rainbow Chaser was a budget title, and as such it was pretty surprising game, as its quality was far beyond what you'd expect from a game for just a couple of pounds. I really don't know what's with Commodore's developers releasing games with the same titles all the time, quite often close to each other too, but it is what it is. Or rather, it was what it was. So two games called Rallycross released on C64 in 1989, one by Namco, the other by Codemasters. And it's the Codemasters one that we'll cover in this video, as it's the better one. I mean, they're both similar and very simple, but this one comes out on top however you want to look at them. Rallycross is a top-down racing game for 1 or 2 players where you race around numerous different tracks for points. And if I'm to be honest, that's pretty much it. Cause after you complete them all, the game just loops back to the first and carries on from beginning. It's not a very deep experience and both graphics and gameplay are pretty bare bones, but given that Rallycross was a budget title, you couldn't expect much more of it. What is curious though is that it looks like an early test ground for later brilliant micro machines that sadly never released on C64. But don't quote me on that, it's just how I feel looking at the game and haven't researched anything about it. Do you remember the movie Tron? Well, Raster Runner takes Light Cycle's idea from the movie and builds a whole 2-player game around it. So you and an opponent, preferably another person not CPU, are riding 2 cycles, one green and one red. The rules are that simple. Each bike leaves a permanent and indestructible path behind it and you have to trap or encompass your opponent in such a way that he has no other way to go and crashes in your trail or a border wall. All that said, each of you have 3 uses of a special force field that allows to cross the opposing player's trail without crashing. These don't replenish however, so it's best to plan not to use them and only ever resort to when there's no other way to avoid death. Like I said, Raster Runner is as simple as they come mechanically, but in the same time it's really playable if you have someone else with you, and can be an afternoon of gaming all on its own. In my not so humble opinion, Raster Runner is the very best Tron-like game on C64. Take it as you wish, that's how I feel. I don't know if you've noticed the pattern while watching my C64 videos, but very often when games are C64 exclusives, they're pretty darn good. Not always obviously, but more often than not. Retrograde is not an exception. It's a mostly horizontally scrolling shooter in which you spend most of your time flying around killing enemies. Eventually, you'll get inside bunkers where you'll also kill enemies but moving downwards and not sideways. Overall, it's probably clear by now that it's a killing bonanza. So, killanza. And yes, there was no such word until today, but it is now. As blunt as I've made it sound saying it's all about killing, Retrograde is actually really good, fast and action-packed. The bodies are varied and there's a lot of them. They drop credits upon death that you can later on use at shops. Bosses are big and mechanically interesting, for 1989 that is, and the game does not get old at all the way through to its very end. There's 12 different weapons that you can power up and you can even sell owned weapons with their upgrades to raise money for other better ones. It's a marvel, in both graphics and gameplay. It may not be the very best shooter on C64, but it's a pretty good one, and one of the most unique in design and gameplay. Retrograde is not very demanding as compared to other shooters, so if you're someone who easily gets tired of replaying the same stage time after time again, it shouldn't happen here. Don't take my word for it though. Try the game out and let me know if it's really as good as I'm saying. Robocop on C64 loosely adapts Data East Arcade's game and is based on 1987's movie of the same title. It's a horizontally scrolling side-view arcade shooter in which you play as titular half-man, half-machine, and in most stages walk from left to right shooting what feels like thousands of criminals. These stages are in most cases brought down to C64 straight from the arcade original, but not presented in correct order. Third and fourth stages are swapped to be precise. 2 of these end with a boss fight against the ED-209 bipedal robot that for some weird reason can only be defeated by Robocop's fists. The game also includes completely new stages not present in the arcade, a hostage scenario that's played from the first-person perspective, where you have to shoot a criminal holding an innocent in front of him like some kind of a disposable meat shield, and suspect sketch minigame where you have to match parts of the face correctly to the suspect within given time limit. Graphically, Robocop is quite good, with main character's sprite presented in high resolution and displayed on nicely designed and colorful stages. All smoothly scrolling, I must add. Sounds are pretty good too, and music, while not the same as in the movie, is memorable and theme accurate. But, and that's a huge but for players such as myself, Robocop is extremely difficult and unforgiving. It's a game that plays well if you're good at it, but if you're not, then it's more annoying than anything else. So approach it only if you really feel like it's something you absolutely need to play or if you enjoy demanding titles. Rockstar Ate My Hamster is a music management game, and it's a good one, even if more on the simpler side and hidden under mounds of silly humor and cartoony graphics. You won't find any arcade skill-based motives here, but what you will is surprisingly addictive and enjoyable to experience. It's not a game that you'll play for months on end, but it's one that you'll see yourself coming back to every few months or years for a quick game or two, just for fun. You, as a manager, are tasked with picking your future band members and instruments they'll be playing on, and then leading them into stardom. Like I said, it's a simple title at heart, so the options you'll have are not overly complicated either. You can ask your band to practice, play a gig, go on tour, organize a publicity stunt, record an album and then release it, and finally offer them gifts to keep them in line. While doing so, you'll face some random events and issues that will require your response, like deciding if they should play a charity gig or accept a sponsorship deal, among others. Rockstar Ate My Hamster is a fun title that's not too demanding and proves that management/strategy games don't have to span over weeks-long campaigns and most definitely don't need to be overly complicated, requiring 5 degrees to play and 7 to enjoy. They can be quick and easy to understand for a pleasant afternoon of gaming. How do you like today's selection, guys? It's pretty good, right? And it's hardly over for the year. One way or another, let me know what your favorites were and what would you like to see in these videos for 1989 before I end the year. As perhaps I've missed something worth adding, and I still can, for as long as I'm not done with 1989. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.